peace negotiations between the US and Russia over the war in Ukraine are set to begin in Saudi Arabia. Europe scrambles to secure its position by ramping up defense spending, and Ukraine is left in disbelief as Washington has not invited its representatives to join the talks with Moscow. And to discuss all this and more, we're joined by Kurt Volker, a former US ambassador to NATO and former US Special Representative for Ukraine negotiations under the previous Trump administration. Good evening.
Good evening. Nice to be with you.
Nice to have you with us. So what is the American vision of peace in Ukraine, and what could be the role of Europe after a ceasefire is reached?
Well, I'll simplify it. We hear a lot of things from different American spokespeople right now, but if I could take a step back, I think it's three things. I think it's a ceasefire, deterrence against future Russian attacks, and burden sharing so that European allies do more. The rest is a lot of detail that I don't think President Trump is focused on yet. I think that there's a lot of pieces that are unknown, and the first piece that's unknown is whether Vladimir Putin can even be brought to a table and he can even agree to a ceasefire. And I think that's what Marco Rubio and the delegation are trying to figure out in Saudi Arabia. Is there any realistic prospect of Putin stopping this war?
So far, it seems that Vladimir Putin is quite eager to enter negotiations with the US. However, you said there were 3 points of this peace plan, and the second one is deterrence.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a bit more about it?
So the ceasefire is just getting both sides to stop where they are. That's not a permanent peace. That's an opportunity for Vladimir Putin to reload and plan the next attack. And so what we have to do as the West is act more swiftly to make it too costly for Putin to do that again. And this is what I think the European leaders in Paris should be talking about, is how does Europe contribute to a security set of assurances for Ukraine and a security presence in Ukraine that will contribute to Vladimir Putin making that call. And if they need backup or enablers from the United States, what are those? And let's get into that conversation.
So mainly European troops on the ground in Ukraine with some sort of backing from the US.
That's what I think is where this is going. Obviously, President Trump and Marco Rubio have not put that on the table yet, but I think anyone who knows the military capabilities of Europe and the United States and what would be convincing to Putin would see you've got to have some U.S. commitment to this, even though it should be European-led.
Mm-hmm. Volodymyr Zelensky says he sees no clear American plan for peace in Ukraine. And, well, we've also heard some very contradictory statements from the representatives of the U.S. administration over the past few days. So do you think that the whole Trump team knows where are they heading?
No, they don't. There is no plan. They're listening and testing. They're talking to Zelensky, they're talking with this Russian delegation, they're talking with allies in Europe, they're seeing what comes out of this Paris meeting. If we had come up with a plan, if the United States had come up with a plan, then people would complain that we came up with a plan without them. And so now they're complaining that we don't have a plan. But what they're trying to do is get a lay of the land and see whether it's actually possible to get an end to the fighting.
Mm-hmm. Donald Trump says he believes Vladimir Putin would like to end the war in Ukraine swiftly, and on the other hand does not believe Volodymyr Zelensky when he says that Putin is readying Russia for a future attack on the eastern flank of NATO. Now, is Putin a more reliable partner for Donald Trump than Volodymyr Zelensky?
I would say just because Donald Trump said that doesn't mean it's what he's thinking. I think what he's doing is trying to convince Putin to engage. Say, okay, we're ready to engage with you to stop this war. The reality is that I think President Trump knows full well that President Putin wants to take him for a ride, and he's watching and waiting and seeing how this goes. With Zelensky, it seems to me that President Trump's view, but I could be wrong, it seems to me his view is that we have done a lot for Ukraine in terms of providing military assistance and financial assistance and humanitarian aid. And he wants to now strike a transactional deal with Ukraine. So we'll help you. We want to help you, but you've got to pay us back somehow. So that's where this whole mineral deal thing came from. I know members in Congress are looking at a loan package for Ukraine rather than aid, so that it would be paid back someday like the British did. So I think that's where that is going on the U.S.-Ukraine side. And meanwhile, I think we don't have any commitment from Russia to stop the war at this moment. So he's trying to find a way if we can get to that.
Mm-hmm. The American and Russian teams of negotiators are to discuss more than just peace in Ukraine. The announcement said the aim of the meeting is to restore good mutual relations. So what else is there on the table? And could Donald Trump maybe be looking to somehow lure Russia out of the Chinese sphere?
I do think that is probably something in the minds of some people in the U.S. is to divide Russia and China. I think, however, that this is more a Russian interest, that they want to put on the table a bunch of other things in order to distract us and get us focused on, whether it's arms control or whether it's Iran or whether it's North Korea, or get a whole bunch of other things out there so we take our eye off the ball of the ceasefire. And I hope that the delegation in Saudi Arabia, I expect the delegation there, they're going to listen to the Russians, they're going to not make any commitments, they're going to come back and talk with President Trump. But I think they'll get a clearer sense of how the Russians are playing this.
Now, relations between EU and the US, especially after the last weekend summit, are strained, to say the least, especially after J.D. Vance's remarks on democracy in Europe. Therefore, could Europe turn to China? It's in an attempt to boost its security, as well. The EU is clearly not being treated as an equal partner for the US.
And somehow people think China will treat them better. I mean, this is laughable.
It's just looking for a bigger partner.
Yeah, this is a pathetic statement about Europe, that Europe feels it needs a partner somewhere to protect them, and that therefore they have to turn somewhere, and that somewhere is China. That's just pathetic. Europe should be developing its own vision, its own goals, its own capabilities, and making its own decisions about what it wants to do on the European continent. And that's something the United States has been urging for a long time. And it's unfortunate that something like J.D. Vance's speech, which was much more about political philosophy of democracy than about anything else, that is the catalyst that gets Europeans upset and resentful. So now they actually are meeting in Paris to talk about what their goal is. So wrong reason, but good response.
Mm-hmm. European leaders are in fact meeting today in Paris, and Keith Kellogg's special U.S. envoy for Ukraine and Russia is meeting tomorrow with the Polish president Andrzej Duda in Warsaw. Now this comes ahead of the Thursday meeting with President Zelensky.
Right,
and
Kyiv. He met today with NATO members in Brussels.
Well, now I'd like to talk about Poland. All right. So, what is the purpose of the meeting with the Polish president, and could possibly General Kellogg listen to the Polish side? Well, Poland has some objections regarding the territorial integrity of Ukraine. Well, the future territorial integrity of Ukraine, as we know that it is at risk, to say the least.
Well, I think the purpose of General Kellogg's visit is to listen and gather information from a variety of allies and from Ukraine. What is the situation? How do they see it? What do they see a good outcome to be? Where does this go from here? So that he can report back to President Trump, who's going to decide next steps once he hears from the team that met with the Russians, once he hears from General Kellogg on his meetings. He's already, I'm sure, heard from Hegseth, and we'll hear from Marco Rubio as well. This is, it's funny because people are saying, President Zelensky said, the U.S. doesn't have a plan. We thought they had a plan. They don't have a plan. There's no plan. And if we had a plan, people will complain that we developed a plan without them. And now instead, what we're doing is going around and consulting with people, and everyone's confused. Why are we consulting with people? So I think people need to relax a little bit and give this some time and a chance for a new administration to get its feet on the ground.
Lastly, President Zelensky wants to take Keith Kellogg to the front line. Now, what is he trying to achieve?
Oh, that's a great idea. That's a very important idea. When I served as special representative, the first thing I did was go to the front line, because you get an immediate personal appreciation of what people are going through. You see how the war is playing out. He's a general himself, so he has been in a lot of active duty command headquarters, and he's going to get a clear understanding of what's happening.
But could this somehow change his mind? Because clearly he has already an agenda that has been discussed with Donald Trump himself. So,
well, I mean, when you say change his mind, I mean, what is his mind? I mean, General Kellogg is a serious, seasoned, experienced general. He understands what Russia is. He understands what's happening in Ukraine. He is trying now to serve President Trump in a way that can get an end to the fighting in Ukraine. And then that will require some additional steps to make sure the fighting doesn't happen again. There's no resurgence of Russian attacks. So he needs to get all the information he can to see how that looks and make recommendations to the president.
Absolutely. So Kurt Volker, former U.S. Special Representative for Ukraine and negotiations under the previous Trump administration. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for watching, and stay with us for much more here on TVP World.